Welcome to the Discovery Pod, where we talk to leading experts from the University of Adelaide about solutions to society's most pressing challenges. Food and water security, cracking the code, finding new ways to power our nation and drive the manufacturing economy. Today, I'm joined by Gus Nathan, Professor and world expert in the delivery of low-cost clean energy technologies, and Yen Zhao, Australian Research Council Future Fellow, exploring how we optimise energy storage, conversion and transfer. Welcome both.
Hello, Andy.
So Australia is mineral rich and our weather patterns lend themselves to renewable energy production, solar, wind and waves. And yet our mineral extraction and exports contribute significantly to our carbon emissions. So how do we decarbonise heavy industry and find better renewable solutions? So Yen, can we start with you? What got you into renewable energies?
Well, renewable energy is actually my childhood dream because I was reading those books, magazines, and I got worried that the greenhouse effect is becoming worse and worse. So I kept thinking that if that gets worse and worse, the temperature increase, the animals, they will die, they will extinct, and probably the environment is no longer good for us as humans to live on the planet.
So it's really a personal mission for you then to apply your knowledge and understanding to really help solve some of these major challenges.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so here in Australia, how do we stack up in the world in terms of renewable energies? Are we really good? Could we do better? Are we not investing enough or not developing these enough?
I think we're doing really good. We're one of the few countries that is leading the research area of renewable energy. But definitely we can do better. For example, in South Australia, we now have more than half of the electricity generated from those renewable sources like solar energy and wind energy. But that figure can be higher as the state government promised in the following 10 or 20 years that will achieve like 100% of electricity generation all from renewable energies.
And so do you think we're going to get there? Are we going to get to 100% renewable energy generation?
I do believe in that.
Yeah. And what are some of the problems with renewables? Why haven't we reached 100% today? What are some of the problems with rolling out renewable energies?
I think the main problem is we need to build the momentum gradually. We need to develop all the related areas. They are all interconnected. I'm not sure if you heard this story. So in some part of the world, people have constructed a very big factories of solar panels, but the productivity is so high, they face a problem of selling those solar panels into households. So it's like of a bucket, one plank is too long, but all the other planks, they are not long enough to support that type of economy. So I think in South Australia, if we want to improve the number to 100%, it needs effort from every aspect of the economy that is related to renewable energy.
Yeah. And what about problems with renewable energies only producing energy at certain times? So when the sun shines, when the wind's blowing, when the tide's high. How do we manage that quite variable energy production?
You are asking a critical question in renewable energy now, because they are not stable. When we have the sunlight, we have the solar energy. When we have a strong wind, we have the wind energy. Then the storage is a big problem that we need to address in this area. Currently, battery technology is widely used to store the electricity, the renewable electricity generated. For example, in South Australia, we have the virtual power plant. The state government have installed the Tesla big battery pack to the north of Adelaide. They are all very good efforts of tackling this problem. But looking like 50 years after this, we need to think about better solutions to store all those energy. Currently, we have 50% of electricity generated from the renewable source. And then in the future, what happens if 100% of the electricity is all from the renewable energy? Do we build another and another of the big battery pack with a lifespan of 6 to 7 years? What are we going to deal with them? So it's a very good solution for now, but for the long term, we probably need to look at alternative solutions. And one of the solutions that I'm currently looking into is to convert all those renewable electricities to transportable fuels.
So, okay, so what are transportable fuels?
Good question. Hydrogen is one of the
I feel
transportable
like I'm being
fuels.
lectured here. It's fine. Yeah. Okay.
sorry.
No, it's good. I'm learning a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so hydrogen, which Gus will talk a lot later on, I use it as an example because it is currently the most exposed concept. For example, the Japan and the US, there are lots of government are talking about hydrogen economy.
Yeah.
So it's a concept that was originated quite long ago, but people started to realize it until the recent few years. So for hydrogen, how do we generate hydrogen from renewable source? First, we need to have water. So for one water molecule, we have 2 hydrogen atoms, we have 1 oxygen atom, and with the renewable electricity generated from sun, from wind, we put that energy into the water molecule and bam, it splits into hydrogen molecule and oxygen molecule.
So completely clean, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for 2 of the water molecules, it can convert to 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So that's how the chemistry works. So in this way, we are taking water or hydrogen as the energy carrier. It carries the energy that is generated from sunlight, generated from wind energy. This is one example. Now we take that example to another one. What if we use other energy carriers? For example, the carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, if it's like too much of it, it's not beneficial. It's causing the greenhouse effect. But actually, we can convert carbon dioxide to liquid fuels. For example, ethane, methane. They, from chemistry, they are the combination of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. So we have carbon dioxide, which provides carbon, oxygen, and then we can have water, which provides hydrogen and oxygen. And using the renewable electricity, we put them together, bam. We have the liquid fuel, which can use the current transportation infrastructure to move it from here to there to different locations. So by using that way, we are storing the energy in a form with much higher energy density. So speaking of energy density is, for example, we have this much of a space. Think of a TV box. If we are using battery to occupy that type of space, then we can get, for example, this amount of the electricity energy out of it. But we are using that space to store the liquid fuels, then we can store much more energy in that confined space.
Yeah. So I hadn't really understood that before. Thank you for such a clear explanation. You're using then renewable energies to convert into a transportable energy form. So are you telling me that electric cars are not going to be here forever? What we're going to see is other fuels that are created by renewable energies will be just as popular as electric cars because of this dynamic in terms of the battery and the power fuel, basically.
Mm-hmm. I think electric cars, they are going to stay for quite a while. Because the technology is mature, people have already taken the concept of electric car. So that's going to stay, in my opinion. So for the long run, probably we will have the hydrogen cars or just the normal cars that we are driving today. The only difference is that the fuel that we put into our car is not the gasoline from underground, but instead it will be the renewable fuel generated by those after those energy conversion process.
Great. So thanks, Yen. And so Gus, if we could just go into hydrogen in a little bit more detail. You and your team do quite a bit of work on hydrogen, and so hydrogen can be used as a kind of energy source, converted from renewable energies as a transportable fuel. But hydrogen has other benefits for heavy industry.
Absolutely. The energy is probably one of the relatively, I mean, to be able to supply energy, it has to be very low cost. But there are other higher value applications for hydrogen. It's already used widely in industry, for example, in the plastics industry and in the petrochemical industry. It's used already as to upgrade fuels and plastics, etc. But in the long, I guess one of the big opportunities is in the iron and steel sector, where currently we make all of our iron and steel using coke, which comes from coal. But metallurgical coke is relatively expensive. It's about double the cost of natural gas on an energy basis, and we think that it's not going to be too long before green hydrogen reaches cost competitiveness with that sector. So the world is already beginning to gear up to replace the current route of making iron and steel with metallurgical coke, to replace it with hydrogen. You might have heard the recent announcement by Liberty in Whyalla, and this is the route that they're moving towards. It'll take some years before it'll be all the way to hydrogen, but this is the trajectory that the world's taking, where we see it'll be one of the probably relatively early high value applications, which will be very large requirement for hydrogen.
And so Liberty, they're a steel producer up at Whyalla?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, they made the announcement, I guess, well, in increasing detail, but recently they've announced that they're planning to convert their current steelworks stepwise into the route that will start with natural gas and then move into hydrogen to make the steel with this route. And then in that's kind of the timeline where we're anticipating that the cost of renewable hydrogen will start to break even somewhere around kind of 2025 to 2030 is when hydrogen will become cost competitive with coke. And so you won't need a subsidy potentially.
Yeah. So we're aiming to then reduce the carbon emissions for the conversion of iron ore into other products. But I mean, is there the potential to completely decarbonise this heavy industry? Not really. You're still going to have some carbon emissions from this.
Well, this is a really good question, and it's actually a really big global challenge. I mean, for example, iron and steel is roughly 8% of global CO2 emissions. Cement and lime are about 7% together. So collectively, this sector with the other metals has been dubbed one of the difficult to abate sectors, which similarly the bit that Jan has talked about with regard to liquid fuels, these are the bits that are more difficult because as a society we can see the pathway to decarbonising electricity. You know, we can drive around and we can see the wind farms and the PV panels and we say, yeah, that's happening. But do iron and steel, the technology is not yet commercial to do it, but it's coming, it's getting close. And when it does, then this is really a critical need for hydrogen as opposed to electricity. There isn't a commercial route to make iron and steel from electricity directly, but there is from hydrogen, which could come from electricity or could come from other vectors. And that route is one where really hydrogen is critical. And when it gets to that scale, then the costs will come down and then it'll start to be able to come into other areas.
And so why is hydrogen so critical in that new pathway?
Great question. So to make iron and steel, you need two things. You need heat and you need a chemical because you're taking iron ore as an iron oxide. So you need to strip away the oxygen, react the oxygen, or called reducing it. And to do that, you take the oxygen in the iron oxide, react that with the hydrogen, so that strips the oxygen from the iron oxide to make again water, and the hydrogen is used to make the water to take the oxygen from the iron ore, and then you're left with the iron. So you need the hydrogen as a chemical to be the reductant. Currently, that's done with the carbon in the coke, and so that pathway it's proven that it can be done, but to do it economically is the challenge. And so to get the technology gradually evolving, the example Jan gave is great about the different planks in the whole economy. They need to evolve together to get the cost down. But then as it does, we're projecting somewhere between 2025 and 2030 is when it'll start to break even. And this is when large production of hydrogen is going to be needed for that process.
So that's why we're pursuing hydrogen, because the double benefits in these areas. But hydrogen's also been a fuel that's been with us for 100 years, hasn't it? You think back early 1900s, the Zeppelins and the large airships, I mean, they were floated by hydrogen. How did they make such large quantities of hydrogen back then? And are you doing it any better today?
That's a great question. In fact, Andy, for everyone else, we had a chat about this, and I didn't actually know exactly how they made it. I had an idea, which I thought was from coal, and I looked up had to do a bit of reading around, and in fact, some people said they did, but the way they made it was by mixing sulfuric acid with iron filings.
Right, wow.
And it's a similar approach. The
hardcore chemistry, isn't it? Yeah.
Makes hydrogen, and that's how they made it in relatively large quantities from available chemicals in those days. And of course, you can do it from lots of ways. Hydrogen has been a part of the economy for many years, but currently hydrogen is a very relatively inexpensive fuel. So it's only used for quite expensive applications, and it's made currently predominantly from natural gas or from coal, and CO2 is released when you do that. So the commercial route of making hydrogen, you still release CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels, and so the path is to then do that via a different route, as Jan has explained.
Yeah. So we're still going to have batteries. Batteries are still going to be an intermediate technology on the route to the completely renewable technology.
Well, batteries will still be a part of the mix for a long time, but they have a complementary role. It's going to be too expensive, and also there won't be enough of the metals available probably to try and do all of our energy storage with batteries, but they do play a critical role in the very rapid response. They've got a great component, but they won't be the only thing. Hydrogen and other components are really complementary, and they'll be for the larger storage and also where you need the chemical for the things like reduction.
So is the Tesla battery still the largest in the world?
Well, it has been the largest till recently, and I think it still may be. I'm not sure about the latest, but it certainly has played a critical role in the state's energy mix and has saved the grid. But it's also worth noting that it's only, even though it's big, it only stores about, for example, 3% of the state's peak power for 1 hour. Right? So you need to have a lot of them if you're going to try and store enough energy to keep us going for a week of not much resource. So it's a critical part of the mix, but of an expensive part, and it won't be realistic to do the whole of our solution in that way, but a critical part of the mix for going forwards. And batteries will certainly have a growing role, and there's also all of the technologies, including batteries, are evolving and getting better with time.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know you do a bit of work on battery technology as well. So what are some of the new technologies around with batteries?
So currently the most commercialized battery technology is the lithium-ion battery, such as the Tesla battery pack. And the new technology in our center that is doing is a new technology called aqueous battery. So for
water battery, literally.
Yes, water-based battery. So the best thing of this technology is that the electrolyte is water-based, so it's very safe. For the lithium-ion battery, the electrolyte is organic-based, so it's flammable, and the lithium is flammable, so that's a factor that we need to consider. But then for those aqueous battery, because it's avoiding the use of organic liquids as electrolyte, so it's very safe from that point of view. And in the past, biggest problem with the aqueous battery is the voltage that it can output is a bit narrow comparing to lithium. But then with the new chemistry getting involved, we can improve the voltage window to a bigger one.
Yeah. So just for a moment, let's look around the horizons for research and investigation. And for new students that might be coming in to the university, what topic areas might they be working on in 2 or 3 years' time that would really represent the cutting edge of this field?
I mean, I guess there are a lot of novel areas that are going on at the same time. We're certainly looking at how we can apply these new technologies to lower the cost in decarbonising the heavy industry sector. And Jan is, I guess, looking at some of the novel material approaches in there. We'd like to talk about a few of those.
Yes. For new students want to do PhD study in the university, we do have many topics for them to choose. So on top of the 2 energy carriers that I was talking about, which there's a lot of research that a student can do to improve the efficiency, we're also looking at using nitrogen as an energy carrier. So we can use the renewable electricity to combine nitrogen with the hydrogen that we just produced, combine them together into a chemical called ammonia. So ammonia is very safe for transportation. So currently the bottleneck in this area is the low conversion efficiency. So for example, if we have like this amount of electricity putting into cracking nitrogen and producing ammonia, probably only this portion can be converted. So that's the biggest challenge. And then we are investigating better catalyst materials that can do a better conversion efficiency between those different energy forms. So yeah, design different catalyst materials for different energy carriers to do the conversion. That are many topics that students can choose. So
plenty to choose from.
Yes.
There. I think I'm also going to ask maybe a difficult question now, but so give me a prediction on when energy production, transport and heavy industry would be carbon neutral and fully support renewable energies. How far in the future is that green future from us?
Well, generally the targets that most industry are working towards is 2050. We just held a forum, and
Can't you get there a bit quicker? Come on, Gus.
Well, some of the international industry is saying that it'll take to maybe 2100 to fully decarbonise iron and steel making. So there are a range of different perspectives around, but I guess the challenge with the heavy industry sector is it is expected to be one of the slowest to decarbonise. Partly that is because the industry is, all the components are very large. The timescale of developing and upscaling the technology alone is typically, well, at least 10 years to get it to pilot scale, then to demonstrate it to commercial scale.
So there's a lot of inertia in that system, isn't there?
A lot of inertia, and also the industry is all, they're trade exposed, they run with high volumes and low margins, and they can't afford to go bankrupt. Yeah. So everyone has to move at a similar pace, so it's critical that, that we have international drivers and stability. The drivers are coming from new international markets. And it's interesting that, for example, different estimates are the cost of making, say, cement to be carbon neutral would pretty much double the cost of cement.
At the moment,
with the current known technologies. Of course, this will come down. Yeah. To do it with steel would maybe add 20% to the cost. However, even with those numbers, that would only add between 1% and 3% to the cost of the final product, such as the cement might double its cost, but the building you're going to make might only go up by 1 or 2%. The steel might go up by 20, 30%, but the cost of the car might only go up by 1%. So this means the end user is usually prepared to pay that 1%, or else it would come by regulation which says we have to have green building standards, everybody goes up 1%, just like now you have to have green insulation in your building, in your house, because they know it's cheaper for the long run. So we think those costs, even with today's technology, they're affordable. It's just a matter of having the systems in place, the market pull. So for example, if an automotive company says, we're going to be offering, or it's already happened, for example, companies like Apple have said, we're going to be making all our computers carbon neutral by 2030 different products, depending which ones they are. So this means that there's now a market for those products, and this will be what will flow through to the manufacturer. But we have to be transforming our industries now, because it's going to take 10 odd years before we can build them, and before it can roll out across the whole industry will probably take to 2025.
So you've got the development of the technologies, which are going to come before the adoption of the technologies, where you're going to require a carrot and a stick approach to make sure we get there.
That's right. And you can't just look at this industry in isolation and blame the industry, because they have to operate in the commercial market they're in, or they go out of business. So you have to have the supply chain, which can come from the end user pool, can come from governments. But Europe is already introducing carbon border taxes, which will mean that anyone who wants to sell there has to decarbonise. So it just needs a part of the market to trickle, and then the investment comes to get it demonstrated, and then the costs start to come down. So this is why we see a cascading effect as they come down, but it will take time to roll out through society.
So this carbon economy is coming, and it's being driven by consumer preference, really. So
absolutely.
It's not a formal system that we tried to put in place before, but through preference.
In Australia there isn't, but I mean there is a formal system introduced in Europe.
Yep.
With the carbon border tax, for example. That's scheduled to come in 2021.
Yep.
So it is in some ends is coming from that end, but others is coming from the market pull. This is what's driving people like Apple to be carbon neutral. They're making these announcements purely on a market base, because there are enough customers prepared to pay, and at the end product level, it's only going to be a few percent. So it just needs a few people prepared to pay that. That drives the market, then the costs come down, and soon it becomes rolled out.
Easy. Gus and Jan, thanks so much for a really great discussion today, and thanks for being on the Discovery Pod. Thanks for listening to the Discovery Pod, brought to you by the University of Adelaide. Join us next time when we discuss food and water security.